All right, we'd love to welcome everyone to today's webinar. It's lovely to see lots of smiling faces out there. And we know that, we've appreciated your setting aside some time to be with us, and we want to make sure that this is a powerful 45 minutes of information for you. So we'll get started straight away. Today's webinar is the first in our series, Becoming a Financial Powerhouse. And we just wanted to let you know that this session will be recorded. And if anyone would like a copy, just let us know at the end of the session and we'll send it through. So today we'll be talking about how to release the burden of advice production. Our names are Tanya and Tamara, and some of you may have met us already, others haven't. We're the founders of the TNT Group, which is a leading Australian outsourcing and coaching business. We've been working in the financial advice industry for many years across many roles, including advisor, practice management, and practice owners. And since starting TNT, our focus has been on helping practices to achieve higher levels of performance by building great teams and delivering exceptional results. It's not just a job for us that we're good at or experts at. We actually love what we do. We're very passionate about it, particularly when we see advisors and practices achieve things that they thought weren't possible. And we're here today to show you how to benefit from some of those great solutions that will deliver outstanding results within your business. So as the webinar unfolds, if you have any questions, please raise your hand electronically and we'll endeavour to answer them as we go. And for those of you that mightn't be familiar with how to do that, there's an icon at the bottom that says reactions. If you click on that, there's an option to raise your hand. And when we see that, we'll ask you. We want it to be an interactive session, so we really encourage your feedback. While we're presenting, we'll just ask you to keep your mics muted. And if we have an overabundance of questions, we'll answer what we can at the time, but those that we can't, we'll push through to the Q&A section at the end so that you all have the opportunity to have your questions answered. So today we're going to explain step by step how to calculate the critical cost of your advice, how to double your advisor's capacity to generate more revenue, and how to reduce your advice production process to just 2 weeks. How many of you are satisfied earning what you're earning at the moment? I mean, how hard is it to earn what we used to earn pre-FOFA? Since then, we've had a Royal Commission, which, was necessary, but it's certainly made it harder to be profitable. We've seen in the last couple of years, planner numbers almost halve. And basically, it's because it's too hard to earn a living like we used to. The last few years have created a nervousness within the industry that has seen advisors more involved in the advice process than ever before. This is often because they want to make sure that, they've ticked every box, and trusting someone is just too risky. We're heavily weighted with compliance, it takes a lot of time, and it's difficult to see how we can be profitable and see as many clients as we'd like to. Every advisor we speak to, without exception, has new clients knocking on the door, but they simply don't have the time for them. However, there is a way to adapt and to be successful and enjoy seeing our clients achieve their dreams. So, talking to you all today in very raw terms, we didn't open our businesses to help our clients become successful or fail ourselves. To be successful today, we must adapt, we must simplify, and we must outsource. With our time and experience in the industry, we've worked with a proven formula that's seen exceptional results and businesses surviving the ever-changing environment. And this is the valuable information that we'll share with you today so you can move forward with success. So let's jump in. When we talk about the advice production process, is this how you feel? We all love Harvey, don't we? Or is it something like this? Absolute frustration. Everyone on this webinar, along with most practices across Australia, find advice production incredibly difficult. So we'd love to hand over to you now. So this is where we'd like a little bit of feedback. Within the advice process that you're currently working with, what are your pain points? Do we have any volunteers? I can start you off if you're all a little bit nervous. Some that we talk to find that, you know, paraplanning can be extremely challenging or unreliable. Some of them have huge time issues, so trying to get through what's necessary for existing clients and no time to see new clients.
Someone just commented research, put that in the comments box. So yeah, absolutely. That time between your client meetings to getting all of your research and comparisons and strategy work together. Compliance is another comment there. Staying across all of that and up to date really is a bit of a full-time job these days. Bid alternative product comparisons. So yeah, okay, a lot falling in that research space. And do you find is the challenge, I suppose, you know, everything we're hearing, it's twofold. So it's the time to do those things and also the cost of getting it done, the cost of the practice or of getting somebody else to do it. All right, great. So thanks for that feedback. That helps us. But yeah, everything that we're hearing and that we've been hearing in the last little while can really be narrowed down into three main pain points. So cost, time, and too much paperwork. And certainly some of those comments are all about the paperwork that goes along with the administration burden that goes along with getting your advice ready. So let's start with the costs. As a paraplanning provider, we're often asked what our fees are for a particular strategy. So the advisor can then add their bit to calculate what their advice fee should be. And this is where planners fail to understand 99% of the time their true costs. If you think the paraplanning fee is what it costs you to produce your advice, you're very wrong. There's the advisor's cost in the time spent in client meetings, strategy work and research and plan preparation. And then there's the hours spent by your support staff or sometimes the advisor themselves preparing and lodging that advice. So these three areas represent how many people and hours are involved in the advice process and the costs of those people. Now, this isn't about drilling down into the overheads of your office. They'll always be there. Our focus is on what we can change, the biggest resource of an advice practice and the most costly, and that's its people. So the hours of writing the SOA, collating the research and strategy, client meetings, and your prep and lodgement, this is the true total cost of your advice. So how can we make our advice more affordable? We know that time for an advisor is split between writing new advice and servicing existing clients. And in the current environment, there's usually more time spent servicing than writing new advice. But again, we'd love to hear from you all now. I'm going to ask a few questions here so we can understand the averages across this group on today. So firstly, how many SOAs do you produce a month per advisor in your practices? Bring up the chat box. Anyone want to? Okay, 7, 2 to 3 per month. 4 to 5, 2 in a good month, okay. 5 to 10, 3 to 4, 2 to 3. So probably somewhere, you know, maybe one a week is probably about the average that you're giving me there. And okay, so soon we're going to jump in and actually look at an average advice production process and the time that that piece of advice takes. The advice that we're going to look at is a standard super and risk plan for an individual. So we'd love to know how many hours now it takes you in practice to produce a super and risk plan. How many hours start to finish, super and risk for an individual? Just wait a second till the answers come up in the chat box. Couldn't say, someone's commented. That's an honest answer, thank you. 12 to 15, 7 to 8 hours, 15 hours. Okay. Anyone else want to jump in there?
Really appreciate your feedback, everyone. It's really helpful.
Okay, last one. What advice fee would we charge for that strategy? $2,400, $4,500, $4,000, $2,000 to $4,000, $3,850 plus risk commission, $3,300. Okay, so we're between 2 and 4.5, roughly.
Excellent.
Now, some of you may not be able to answer this question, but what hourly rate do you charge? I know I said last question before. What hourly rate do you charge your advisor's time out at? Do you have an hourly rate per planner? Okay, $440, $330, $300, $250, $330, $380, should be $300 to $350. Somebody has said $380. Okay. Great. Thank you for that feedback. All right, so we'll jump back into our slideshow now. Thank you for that feedback. Over to you, Tan.
Yeah, no, I was just checking through those figures there. That was really helpful, everyone. So thank you for that. And for all your benefit, from a TNT perspective, we've worked with easy 300 practices across a number of licensees now. So we know the time necessary for this type of advice. So it was good to get your feedback across that. The most important information you can take home today as an advisor is that your time is worth something. It is valuable and you need to value it. It's chargeable. A high-performing practice recognises that, you know, every minute of an advisor's day is billable time. And what most advisors fail to recognise is that every minute they're sitting in the office is a cost to the business. The other important factor too is that if you don't delegate these tasks, then you're going to hit a ceiling of what you can physically do. You can become time poor with too much admin to do, and you'll never increase your capacity, and your advice will be produced at a premium, as we're going to have a look now on the following table. So as Tamara just mentioned, we were just talking through, you know, fairly basic moderate strategy of super and risk. So now we're going to look through the time or the tasks and the time that involves. And these two columns will represent pretty much the tasks involved. So the first one goes from the reviewing the client file right down through to lodgement, and the second column represents the time in each area. So before I go any further on this table though, you know, I've just mentioned that TNT have worked with a large cross-section of practices. These are the time frames that have clearly averaged out across the industry on each task. If your time frames are blowing out in any of these areas, then we can discuss that a little further into the presentation. So we see the review client file, you know, half an hour. We've seen that most planners like to have 2 client meetings, the initial and a second, at an hour each. The advisor needs to do the file note, update the fact find. This takes generally about an hour. The strategy and research, 3 hours. Para planning, 5 hours. Checking the plan when it comes back to the practice, half an hour. The preparation of the implementation documents, 3 hours. There's the presentation of the SOA at an hour, and then lodgement of 6 hours. You'll notice that some areas align green as this table opens up, these are areas that are outsourced. So now we've established what the tasks are and how long each task takes. Now let's look at our costs. So we're going to look at three options in getting these tasks done. The first is with the advisor unassisted. Now we've noted an hourly rate at the top there of $400. This is an industry minimum. So if you're charging less than this, you really need to review it. The second column is the advisor with some support, and the third column is the advisor with optimal support. So I'll just remind you again that the green is what is being removed from the advisor. Now we're going to look at the cost of these different scenarios. The advisor unassisted is doing all the tasks himself, except for the paraplanning, which in most cases is outsourced, and we hope none of you are doing your own paraplanning. The second scenario, advisor with some support. He's outsourced paraplanning and has someone in support preparing the implementation documentation and following through with the lodgement. The advisor with optimal support has outsourced his strategy and research, the paraplanning, the preparation of implementation documents and lodgement. There is a huge cost saving between the advisor doing everything and the advisor with some support, but most outstanding is the result in the last column where the advisor is using optimal support. Now, again, we're just going to stop here for a moment. The first scenario is a tough one, but some advisors are in this position. Often the thinking here is that I, the advisor, if I do all the work, then I save a bit of time and I'll save some money by not outsourcing. They can also feel that they need to be across more of the process now that our compliance requirements are so weighted. But if the advisor reasons like that, does that mean that now the advisor is doing, let's say the preparation of implementation documents, that the value of his time drops to that of someone in administration to $70? That is totally unsustainable, and it's a discredit to your professional advice. The second scenario is possibly where most of you sit, but in both those cases, if your profit and loss report is not already showing the impact of less revenue than previously, then I promise you it soon will. We've all come through a very difficult year of incredible due diligence and paperwork, and not as much client facing as we used to, and we know that it's hit the bottom line for everyone. In the third scenario with the optimal support, the reduction of time for the advisor and the reduction of cost starts to really show with a much more positive benefit to the practice. So now we're going to add to the bottom of this table the cost of administration support, which in most cases is outsourced. Option 1 to option 3 shows a cost reduction of just over $4,000 on just that one piece of advice. If we look back up to the line that says strategy and research, when the planner does that at around 3 hours of time, it's costing $1,200 of charge out time. A strategist support would only cost $165 for the same job done, and done usually better. When we asked how much you charge for a moderate strategy like super and risk, you mentioned fees of between $2.5 to $4.5. Practice simply won't survive in the new world of advice by operating that way. There is no way that when you look at a table like this, that any of you would charge $7,380 for a super and risk plan. Some wouldn't even charge $4,400. And even if you did, that's break even. It's not making a profit. In the example on screen, just notice the line that's called total advisor cost and time. The advisor's time reduces from 17 hours to 8 hours in the second scenario to 5 hours in the third scenario. From 17 to 5 hours, we've now freed up 12 hours of advisor time. It's not hard to imagine the increased time available to now see more clients and the increased revenue that can be realised from seeing more clients. And this only happens when you engage the right support. There are many tasks advisors are doing that they shouldn't be. And we've discussed the possible, reasons for that. And every advisor we speak to agrees with us. The challenge here, though, is believing that change is necessary and then actually committing to it. This might be a comical gift, but let us say right here, in most conversations we have with advisors, very agreeable to change, just as long as they don't have to change. One of the main roadblocks for an advisor when they consider taking on support staff or outsourcing is the perceived cost. It seems ironic in the financial industry that advisors don't really consider their own time and expertise as valuable. In an occupation that is driven by numbers and outcomes, it's not rocket science that if you pay someone less to do the same job, you're going to make more money. So looking at this screen, we're going to make it extremely simple. The only 3 things advisors must be responsible for are these: client meetings, file notes, and the fact find. Now, some of you might think you're already doing this. Others are not and are still taking on all these tasks themselves. But whether you have an office full of people or a sole practitioner, you can all benefit from these suggestions to have great outcomes, as we've seen, but we'll talk through. And this can be done by either delegating or outsourcing the tasks that you shouldn't be doing. And if you are doing these things, your advice is costing too much. We've just seen that on the previous table. And you might think every now and then, oh, look, I'll just do it myself. It's just quicker, easier. It's not affordable at a cost of $4,000. You are devaluing your own profession. Now, all of you are familiar with the idea of delegating your preparation and lodgement, but perhaps not the strategy and research work. Some of you think you have this support, but are not receiving the maximum benefit from it. So let's show you what a strategist does. Now we're going to clearly explain the critical value of a strategist and pinpoint where their role starts and how involved they need to be along the way.
So a successful advisor-strategist relationship should look like this. A great strategist is an expert in that role. And one of our beliefs in business is that you must surround yourself with people who are better than you. And this principle is really key to ensuring that the advisor-strategist relationship is a successful one. So a great strategist is faster than an advisor when it comes to the pre-SOA research and strategy. They have more knowledge on the products and legislation, and so they can guide the advisor in the right direction. They know how power planning need to receive the information, which means that you get a really seamless and fast handover to power planning. They're a compliance expert and act as a real safety net for the advisor, which, as we mentioned earlier, is becoming a bit of a full-time job. And they can respectfully challenge the advisor to make sure that we're delivering the best client outcomes. And for most strategies, they do all of this within 1 to 2 hours. So how does it work? Well, for those who choose to outsource this role, and we know this from a TNT perspective, it's extremely simple and the transition is very smooth. You can choose to promote someone internally, but it will take some time to train your strategist internally. But either way, the hardest part for advisors, we find, is making the decision to make that change. So our message is this: you have to let go to grow. Now, we know some of you might have trialed a support service in the past, and that service promised to provide a support like this strategist, but they then failed. So it's pointless for an advisor to spend their valuable time working with someone with a random thought process or a subpar skill set. Our strategists are trained to think like you do. And let's not forget the ultimate benefit to this role is the time and cost saving for the advisor. As we've just seen, $4,000 saved on an average piece of advice, and every piece of advice. So partnering with a strategist is a critical step in allowing you to double your capacity, see more clients, and lift the ceiling that you currently have by taking on too much of this work yourself. And for the practice, this means more meaningful relationships with more clients and more income. So we'll now show you how to make these changes and reduce your advice production time frame to 2 weeks. Okay, so we've worked through how to produce your advice affordably and how to create greater capacity for yourself or your advisors. Our third pain point was time. So it's question time again now. In the case of our super and insurance advice that we've been discussing, how long does it take your practice to move from the client meeting to the SOA presentation? So how many weeks would you normally have for that part of the strategy? Okay, thank you. 6 to 8 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, 3 to 4, 6, 4 weeks, 4, 2 to 4. Okay, that's a shorter time frame. Good. 3 to 4, 6. Wonderful. All right. In line with what we have been hearing in the market, we're hearing 6 to 10 weeks is really common. Some of you are a little bit shorter than that, which is good to see. So even at 4 weeks, 5 weeks, in our view, that's certainly a delayed advice process and means that there's a backlog somewhere. And that's going to happen whenever your team is at capacity and starts to fall behind. And it's a really shockingly acceptable position for many practices to be in. It's almost becoming the norm. An advice backlog, though, creates a negative experience for the client. It's inefficient for everyone involved, and it increases the cost of producing that piece of advice. 85% of advisors that engage with TNT have realised the huge time saving of using our strategist service. And for them, this support removes the administration burden and the constant stress and worry for them of not getting back to their clients as soon as they should. So we're going to look now at how this process works for them and for others who have an in-house strategist. So our first step in the process is our client meeting. The advisor leaves the client meeting and immediately completes the fact find and file note. And it is important here that you or your advisors are disciplined with that step. The fact find and the file note really should be done immediately after your meeting, or at the very least later that day. Within 2 days, the handover meeting with the strategist occurs. So in this meeting, the advisor and the strategist discuss potential strategies, products, alternatives to be modelled, any other calculations that might need to be run. A day later, so it's very quick, the strategist completes that research, the bid and the plan request, and runs it past the advisor for a final confirmation before power planning. We then move to power planning stage. Within 5 days, the plan is completed and the application preparation can commence. So we have the completed plan back in-house now. We always recommend a compliance check on that plan to be completed in the practice. That happens in the next day. And then we're ready for SOA presentation. So start to finish, that's a 2-week turnaround.
And a 2-week time frame for your advice production is very achievable and should be a practice's minimum standard. It goes without saying that this means that the client experience and your relationship remains strong, and also the revenue hits the bank sooner. So let's look now at the 4 absolutes. Firstly, value your time. Small changes will add up. Dictate file notes immediately after each meeting. Don't type. Commit to completing them every day. Don't bank them up to be done at the end of the week. Be a smart scheduler. Block out 30 minutes after each client meeting for file notes and fact find completion. These reminders might seem like a no-brainer, but these are some of the most time-consuming tasks for an advisor when not completed immediately after the meeting. And the longer they're left, the longer it takes for an advisor to remember what the conversation and the client situation was. Secondly, your strategist is your greatest asset. So the strategist shouldn't be someone that's just a support person, as we've seen. They actually need to think like the advisor, otherwise it won't work. And they need to be an extension of the advisor. There needs to be a real trusted relationship between the two. Thirdly, we don't accept backlogs in the practice. If you're at capacity in-house, outsource. It needs to happen. With the exception of those three things, the client meeting, the fact find, and the file note, every other task can be outsourced. And finally, surround yourself with people who are better than you. Who in your team is driving the timeframes and who is holding your advisors accountable? It's important to recognise there are critical people involved in nailing your advice production. And your outsourced provider should be an extension of your team. Make sure that this relationship that you have with them, that you're working with the best. If you commit to making these changes, you will at least double your advisor's time and reduce your costs. This is a proven outcome. These four absolutes are non-negotiable in the advice world today. It's physically not a sustainable business model without living by these optimal efficiencies. And regardless of whether you're a single planner or a multi-planner practice, across any licensee, these solutions are available to every one of you, and it can be very simple and extremely easy. Implementing this change will take an average practice to a high-performing practice. So we've now discussed how to calculate the critical cost of your advice, how to double your advisor's capacity to generate more revenue, and how to reduce your advice production process to just 2 weeks. You're here today because you care about what you do and you want to do it better. We also know that most of you aren't earning what you used to, but there is a solution and it isn't complicated. Advisors are seeing some amazing results, and it's all about partnering with those who do it better than you and then trusting them. As experts in the field, we know that the changes we've discussed are the difference between success and failure in today's advice practice. So today we don't want any of you to leave this webinar without knowing what your next steps are. So our offer for you today is to help make these necessary changes is to start with a conversation with us. We're opening up specific blocks of time to be able to discuss possible solutions for your practice free of charge. And then you can start to see the benefits of exceptional support. So you can book that with us today. And then soon you might feel like this. Or possibly even this.
That would be nice.
So we really want to thank you for putting the time aside to join us today on the webinar. And we hope that attending this session will change the future of your business. So we'd love to hand over to you now if you've got any questions that may have, been raised through the session that you haven't had answered yet.
Okay, everyone's on mute still, I think. So please, we'd like to have a great chat with anyone. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
With the strategist role, when you talk about building a relationship with that person, is that strategist going to be someone that's assigned to you from day one, and then where capacity is available, continue to use that person in the future? Or will you be just
spot on?
Yeah.
So definitely, as you say, depending on capacity, where possible, we'll keep you with the same strategist, at least for each advisor in your practice, if not for the whole practice, depending on the size of your business. Sometimes if you're sending a lot of work through, there might be 2 strategists that you work with. But even between the 2 of them, that we're keeping really thorough notes on our system about the way that you like to work, all the different things that we're doing with you, so that there's good communication. But almost always it's just the one. Yeah.
And is your strategist, are they the power planners you guys are currently using, or are they different roles in TNT?
No, so they're our senior power planners.
Yep.
And they've all been, I believe every one of our strategists at the moment, they've certainly been power planners for a number of years in practices as well, but they've also all been advisors. So They've got that experience from both sides. And generally they'll go on and write the, we generally keep it start to finish. So they'll do the strategy work and write the SOA as well. So you're dealing with that one person throughout.
Yeah. Continuity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, any more questions from anyone? How did you find the presentation today? Was it useful?
Yes, very.
Great, thanks, David. We've had Steve had to go, but he said it was a great presentation and looks forward to discussing options further.
It's a bit confronting to some extent too.
It is, isn't it? We see it in black and white like that, and also start to see, I think all of us, you get into the weeds of what you're doing in your practices every day, and you don't start to think about probably the value that you're losing in yourself by doing more than you need to do. And when you start to see it on screen, it starts to make real sense around what you should and shouldn't be doing as a planner. So it's a good way to probably reset, rethink, and go forward with a much better approach to how the advice is done. How do you operate in your practice, Philip?
We use you guys, but lockdown's just made a mess of everything for the last 7 or 8 weeks. So
Yeah.
How do you dovetail when you're doing implementation of recommendations, and it might, for any number of reasons, be over a number of weeks, let's say withdrawal and recontribution strategy, and there's a fairly high level of client contact, is ensuring that the client doesn't ring up and you've got no clue as to where everything's at. If you're not actually, or your staff, presently our staff would work quite closely with our clients because they know our money is about to be deposited into a bank account, or it's about to be debited out of a bank account, or whatever it might be. How do you actually make sure that the advisor or the advisor support team completely up to date where everything's going? Because that could be a very vast amount of correspondence.
Yes, yeah, good question. So depending on your systems that you use internally, where possible, we'll try and fit in with your system. So if you're, recording file notes in a certain location that we can have access to that, then we'll sometimes go in and just keep file notes just as a support staff person would in your practice. So that way, if the client calls up, you can jump in and see anytime exactly where it's up to and what's happening with it in the last time it was actioned. If you would rather keep those systems in-house and that we don't have access to that, then our back office team give you an update at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. Again, that's your preference to say, okay, these are the files we're working on, and this is exactly where it's up to. So you've got that there handy. If the client calls up, you can see exactly where it all is.
There's a clear advantage in doing what we would presently do, is we share an X-plan access for you to just update the file notes.
Yeah, that's what a lot of practices do with us at the moment, and we can put the file notes straight in there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And in a quiet moment too, you obviously, we've talked about effectively what you do for new business, but clearly reviews, you're also comfortable doing those and preparing whatever review template we might use.
Yes, no problem. Yeah, we use SOA and new business a lot, but absolutely replace ROA or record of advice or review document with any of those.
Okay.
Yeah, the process is almost exactly the same.
Well, also, thank you, Dana. We'll definitely send that recording through to you. She messaged on the chat.
All right. We might wrap it up there. There's no more questions from anybody. As we said, we're more than happy to yeah, send out a copy of the recording, just email us back, and we'll get that arranged for you. We'll also be sending out some email about some feedback from you all, which we'd really appreciate. And also, if you have any other, and feel free to let us know now, but any other topics that you'd want us to cover for future webinars. So this is something that we haven't done this for a little while, but we really wanted to, particularly in the current environment where most of us are working from home. You're all, well, most of you, running practices from home. And I think it'll be some time until we have the ability to get back into going to face-to-face PD days or any other peer sessions like that. So we think it's really important that we can provide some opportunities for sharing of information, educating you on the things that we've learnt over the years. So this is going to become a webinar series, and we're in the process of structuring our next 2 topics. So please let us know if there's an area in particular that you might be challenged with in practice, and we'll make sure that that's a focus for us.
Yeah. And for those of you, Philip and Daniel, that were talking through, or, the advice cost or the strategy support, please, be noisy. If you need to know anything from us or need support in that area, we're more than happy to talk that through and help assist, because, we are all on the same team. We want to make sure the advice space still is a profession out there, that it's an absolute necessity for our clients and for people out there, but it's about how we do it smartly now and how we do it efficiently, because we still need to earn $1 ourselves, but we still also need to give the absolute best to our clients. So there's better and smarter ways to operate, and sometimes it's just too hard to think about. But when others have done it, and it's a bit like the old, I hate reading instructions sometimes. If someone can just tell me what to do, I'm happy with that. So this is one of those scenarios. We know inside out. We know it back to front. We know it with our eyes shut, and have seen amazing results from it. And we're more than happy to help and support and get you up and running.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. Really appreciate your attendance today. And we will let you know when our next webinar session that goes after this is on, but we'll also send you recordings and a bit of a pack with regard to today's session. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you.